I'm Courtney, and this is the Accounting Struggle, where we speak about our struggles with accounting openly and honestly. We do not run from them. Today's video is all about my tips for how to improve the quality of your work in accounting. I have received review notes around these things, and I have figured out ways to think about how to improve, and I've seen improvement in the quality of the work that I'm producing, and I want to share that with you all today if you are struggling with some of the same things or if you're new to accounting. Now y'all, the reason why I wanted to do this video is because I've been working in accounting for nearly 5 years altogether if you count all my internships, and I've had different roles in accounting, as you know, and I have gotten a lot of feedback, tons, because I harass people until they give me feedback. And a common theme has been surrounding the quality of my work and how I can improve upon that. And so now that I've kind of nailed where my biggest mistakes and hangups were and how I've improved, I've improved a lot, but I'm always taking on new work, so that brings on new challenges and new opportunities for, growing. So I wanted to share this with you because if you're just starting out, if you are working in accounting, you're likely getting feedback on, okay, here's some of the things you did wrong, and you might be feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so bad at this, I don't know what to do, or maybe you're not, but I'm very dramatic, and that was kind of my thoughts, like, oh my god, I'm too dumb to live, they're gonna fire me because I made like one little mistake. And they're not gonna fire you. Relax, don't be dramatic like me. Here's a few tips on how you can go about improving your quality of work. My first tip, and I think it's probably the most important one, is to truly understand the engagement. Whatever it is that is your project, whatever your engagement is that you're working on, whether this be in public accounting or industry or whatever your job is, you have to really truly understand what your assignment is. If you don't have a thorough understanding of what your assignment is, you are more likely to screw it up. And when I say thorough understanding, I mean beyond the surface of like, my job is to do this tax return, or my job is to perform this reconciliation. You want to really understand the why. Why are we doing this in the first place? How do I need to do it? Another thing that I like to think about is, what are all the pieces of the puzzle? Like, this one thing that I'm doing is one piece. What else is it going to impact? When you have all of the picture and scope, and you can see every connection, and you know exactly what's impacted by your one role, it really does help to have a better grasp on what you're doing and to have a more thorough understanding of what you're doing. So a lot of times people will give you work to do, and they'll say, hey, go do this, and we need you to, you can just kind of follow along with last year. They give you like some vague instructions and kind of need you to fill in the holes because there's so much trust that you can figure it out. You might not, I don't need to sit here and hold your hand and go through every single step with you. You're very smart. You're going to know exactly how to fill in those holes. That's kind of the expectation in a lot of roles, but that's not always the reality. Sometimes you're like, no ma'am, I do need you to hold my hand. I don't know what I'm doing. So in those instances, what you really need to do is be very communicative about where your gaps are. Just ask the right questions until you get to a level of understanding that is thorough enough for you to at least get started and do a good first draft of whatever it is you're working on. I'll give you an example. If you are given an assignment where it's like, we need you to perform this reconciliation, we want to make sure that these figures here tie out, this year ties out to that year, and that's your assignment, and you're like, okay, cool, I just need to make sure these two numbers end up matching, and here are the steps I need to take to get there. You leave open some space for issues that could arise, or things that maybe you haven't considered that are impacted by what you're about to do. So you really need to ask a few more questions, at least to yourself. Maybe you don't have to present them forth to whomever gave you the assignment, but you need to ask a few more questions before you are at a full level of understanding, before you go and perform this reconciliation. So you need to say, what's the goal? The goal isn't simply to make sure these two numbers match, because there's a lot of things you can do to make those two numbers match. What is the true goal? Like, what am I really trying to reconcile? Do I want to make sure that these numbers match because what? So you want to do a little bit more digging to uncover what your steps are, and then you want to ask, what else is this impacting? What other accounts are impacted by these two balances, and why is it so? What else could be connected that could that I'm maybe not considering that could also impact these balances. Everything is not always as simple as just following along with last year. I learned that the hard way. Sally is not that good of a friend, but you know, she's cool, she's an acquaintance, but she's not your best friend. You do have to really start to do some digging and thinking on your own of like, does this make sense? I heard that so much in my career. Ask yourself, does this make sense? Just be giving some thought to like, what is the overall goal of this project? Why do I need to do this? What are we trying to accomplish here? So that way you'll know if you've done it correctly. So that's my first tip. Now, the more obvious thing of making sure that you produce quality work is to do a good self-review. So I'll be honest with you, self-review is not something that I started off being super strong at, but the thing that I'm learning and the thing that I have learned and I can see in hindsight, the key to a good self-review is knowing what to review for. It's more than cosmetic. So when I was self-reviewing in the beginning, let's say when I started in tax, I would look over my return once I was done. I would go ahead and do all the books, and then once I started on the return and putting all the information in, I would do a review that says like, oh good, retained earnings is balanced, the balance sheet balances, yep, this looks right, yep, I checked that box, that's there, yep, the name is spelled good, yep, looks good. And that was my idea of a self-review. Now, as you might imagine, that was not a thorough enough self-review. So I was still getting review notes like, oh, this was incorrect, or you missed this, or this, and I'm like, oh my God, how could I have missed that? I reviewed it. But sometimes I would get feedback that says you need to really ask yourself, does this make sense? So when you're doing a self-review, just understand that it's deeper than just cosmetic. That's cosmetic is one part of it, but you do need to do some analysis. You should be looking for specifics. Like if we're talking numbers and comparison of year over year, you should be looking at like, does this meet my expectation? Is this number reasonable for what I would expect it to be? I mean, last year it was negative 500 million and now it's positive 20. Like, make it make sense. Does this seem reasonable? And if it doesn't seem reasonable, what is the reason? What can I point to that says it's not reasonable, it's very, very drastically different this year, but here's why, because of this thing. You want to be able to do that kind of explanation and kind of thought process when you're reviewing your work, and you want to look for things that are common mistakes. You won't know initially what common mistakes are. You'll have to make a few, or you can ask before. Don't go out and make the mistakes. You can ask, what are some things that I should be looking for? When you have a mentor or someone who's kind of coaching you through the process when you're first getting started, you can say, what are some things that I should be on the lookout for? Or what are some things I should be considering when I'm reviewing this work? I think that's a great question to ask. I would ask whoever you're working with. But if not, if you've done a couple of these reconciliations or whatever type of projects you're working on and you've gotten feedback, apply that feedback and be thinking of that in the back of your mind, like, okay, I know I messed up on this last time, so let me make sure I get this right this time. So just make sure when you do your self-review, you're looking deeper than just what's at the surface of, yep, I checked that box, yep, my balance sheet balances, because that used to be like, oh, I'm good, my balance sheet balance is like, what? It's good. But it's so much more than that, and there's so many more things that could be missing. So do a deep thought process of like, does this make sense? And work that into your time frame. A lot of my concern when I was in a billable environment, I was thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to hurry up and finish this because of the budget. But it's no sense in turning in work that is not quality, that you know is flawed, or that you know you haven't thoroughly reviewed, because then it's going to be even more over budget when the person with the higher billable rate has to go in and fix some of the stuff that you left off or messed up. So just be giving yourself enough time to look through, asking good questions up front, and making sure you have a clear understanding of what your goals are with whatever it is you're working on. And another thing you want to be asking yourself is, did I achieve the goal? That's a part of your self-review. So if you have a question of like, this is my goal for this project, once you're reviewing and you're at that point where you're looking over everything, ask yourself, did I achieve my goal? Does this satisfy what it is we were trying to accomplish? If the answer is no, then you've likely skipped a step somewhere and you need to go back. But if the answer is yes, then good. You know you've done some solid work there. So my next tip is to make sure that you find ways to add value to your work. I have had a lot of jobs over my lifetime, so I don't remember which job it was that I learned this piece of advice, but it stuck with me over the years. I think it was my stint at a credit union. I don't remember. It was some training, but they were saying, don't be an order taker. So don't do what you're told. So if you go to McDonald's or wherever you eat, I hope it's not McDonald's, and you order something and you're like, hi, I would like a number one. And they say, yep, okay, great, number one, here you go. When you are doing work, any job you're doing, you want to be thinking about what else should be added to this. What else, not that you asked for, but just what else needs to be a part of this process. So when you're looking at engagements, and if it's your first one, obviously you're not necessarily going to be expected to add value, but you always can look for opportunities to add value, and it doesn't have to be some astronomical discovery. It can be something small, but you want to be leaving things a little bit better than how you found them and seeking ways to add value to your engagements. So an example of this would be, how can I make this process more efficient? If you're dealing with a work paper or some type of process and you see an inefficiency or a snag in the process and you're like, this is not how I would do it, but I mean, that's how they've been doing it. Do it how you would do it and say, hey, I found this way to, to get this done faster. I added this tab where it summarizes all this to make it a little bit easier to understand. If you can find ways like that to just make the process a little better or make the project better, to add a little bit of special sauce to it, that is a way of adding value. It doesn't always have to be cracking the code or doing something monumental, but small changes like that are much appreciated. Just because something is already done a certain way doesn't mean it has to continue being done that way. Now this can be anywhere you are in your career. It can be early on, it can be later in your career. If you're watching this, you're probably a little bit more early on in your career, but if you are, say you're doing a process, you're doing some sort of project, and this is the way that it's just set up, it's always been this way, and this is just the way that it's done, and you're working through and you're like, wait a minute, I bet we could totally integrate so-and-so into this process, and it would cut down on like so many of the hours per week, and we would be able to free up that time to work on stuff that is more valuable. What if I present that to the partners or the manager or whomever? It's an idea. That's just one example of ways that you can add value. Or if you find that there's information that isn't useful in the process, or if there are steps that are not useful, that don't add value, see about how you can take those things out of the process. I mean, you definitely want to communicate with the people that you're working with on whatever this engagement is before you make these changes. But if it's stuff that can make a process more smooth, more efficient, and just overall just a better quality, then I think that everyone would be on board with that. So definitely look for ways to improve upon whatever engagement that you're doing. See how you can add value to it in any way that you can. So my last tip when improving upon the quality of your work in accounting is, this might be totally common sense to a lot of people, but to some people like myself, this wasn't something that I ever really considered or thought a lot about when I was reviewing and doing the whole process of making sure my work, is of a certain quality. I wasn't doing little things that were cosmetic, like making it look pretty, dress it up and make it real for me. So for instance, in Excel, if you are dealing with large data sets, sometimes the columns aren't wide enough and all the numbers just look like pound signs. Going in and making sure that before you turn in all of your work, before you save a document, you're like expanding all of the cells. You're making sure that all the formatting is the same. You're making sure that you scroll to the top of the document so that it's not like when they open it up, the workbook is not on the 5th tab all the way scrolled to the bottom 20,000th row. I mean, that sounds very insignificant, but when someone is reviewing your work behind you, you want things to be as simple as humanly possible. You want them to be able to see something that is clean and presentable and just well produced, especially if these are things that are going to a client. Even if they're not going to, you know, someone in upper management, if they're going to directly to a client, you definitely want to make sure things are spelled correctly and formatted correctly in a way that's easy to read. It makes sense. It's not like you're spending all day on fonts and things like that, but if something can be presented in a way of like, we charge these people a lot of money to do this, let me make sure it looks nice. So just making small changes to your work before you turn it in. So after you've done the work, after you've thought about it, you've analyzed it, you know it makes sense, you've reviewed it, you've done a deep analysis, you're like, this is perfect, this is accurate, I know it's correct. Go and do another sweep through and just make sure that it looks nice. I know that that sounds like, girl, don't nobody got time to be making sure stuff is spelled correctly, I need to turn this in. But your clients are paying for this. Your superiors will be looking at this. This is work that you want to make sure it's your best. So just think about that when you're turning in something. If you're turning in a workbook that has 35 tabs, just make sure things are, when they open it up, it's just as easy as possible. Or when you're sending emails, make it as easy as possible for people to read. So if you're referencing other things, like here's the link. I don't even want you to have to go through the trouble of reading it. This is ready for your review. It's ready available at this link here. So just think about that kind of stuff when you are turning in work and you're producing work. I think that it's very important to make sure that you produce quality work. I know that probably goes without saying, but because it goes without saying, people don't say it. So sometimes you forget that it's a thing that people really care about. I know that it is because I've made every single one of these mistakes before and I've gotten all of this feedback, so I'm certain that it is something that is valued. You really want to show that you take pride in the work that you're producing and that you care about how others perceive that work, whether that be the client or literally just your senior, your manager, whoever's reviewing this. You want them to be proud of it, you want to be proud of it, and you want to do a good job, like, because it's your job, what's your name? Think about how you can improve it and leave it a little bit better than how you found it, and that will really set you apart and take you far in your career. So I hope these tips are helpful. If you have any others, please do add them in the comments for anyone else who might be reading, who might be looking for more ways to improve on the quality of their work that they're producing in accounting. And yeah, I hope that you found this video to be helpful. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. So I'm really excited. I officially hit 500 subscribers. This is not a lot for YouTube. There are people who have million subscribers, but because my channel is based solely about accounting and I'm just a girl filming on her iPhone that is like 3 iPhones behind in, you know, little corners of my house and uploading without any real cool technology. I'm not doing any fun like you know, scandalous or salacious stuff on here. It's literally just me talking about my struggles with accounting. So the fact that 500 people have signed up to be like, yes, please give me more of that, that is really rewarding and I'm very excited about it. And so I just wanted to thank you for everyone who has subscribed to my YouTube channel. You are much appreciated. If you have not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I am always here, and by always I mean like once a week. Be sure to go to The Accounting Struggle, which is the blog, theaccountingstruggle.com. I added some new merch out there, so be sure to check that out if you have time. If you don't have time, please make time. That's all that I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye.